Teddy No Legs, Jack O'Brien, and Caleb waited in the shadows. Mary Jane hated the narrow maze of back streets and rookeries around Caleb's dingy lodgings, but he'd insisted it was the safest place to meet and divvy up the earnings from the tailor's safe. She squeezed through a gap in the leaning fence. The backyard stank of rotting veg, cat piss, and something worse she didn't care to name. She wrinkled her nose.
"Where's Aaron?"
she asked. Caleb gave a shrug that was half sneer.
Fuck knows, he's had his share already.
Mary Jane's eyes narrowed. The raid hadn't yielded half what Aaron had promised, and now the little bastard had vanished. Caleb, scowling, began pulling the coins from a grubby rag. The money was pitiful, a few shillings apiece, enough for gin and rent for a week at best.
"This it?"
Mary Jane said, her voice sharp.
Yeah.
Caleb admitted, anger seeping into his tone.
"What the fuck, Caleb? I'm the one who'll get recognized if the tailor puts 2 and 2 together. You 3 can disappear into the night, but me—"
She jabbed a finger at her chest.
"I'll be the one in the cells."
Teddy No Legs waved it off, already pocketing his share.
Better than nothing, Mary Jane.
O'Brien gave a grunt, the coins already clinking in his fist.
Hardly worth the trouble. Trust me, if I catch up with the runt, he'll fucking know about it.
For them, it was nothing more than a lark. Another night, ending in a scrap and a bit of pocket money. Run of the mill. But for Mary Jane, it was risk. Her face, her neck, her freedom. Teddy and O'Brien slipped off, eager to spend their earnings. Mary Jane stayed behind, staring at Caleb.
"I want a fucking explanation."
Caleb rubbed his face, weariness and anger etched deep.
I know, believe me, I'm as pissed off as you are. Aaron said there was 50 quid easy. Must have been talking out of his arse. Took the best of what we had, fucked off, left us with scraps.
Mary Jane folded her arms, glaring.
"Fucker, how come? Him getting his share before anyone else sees the money."
Caleb's mouth twisted.
Yeah, convenient. And if I see him again, I'll slit the little rat's throat.
Mary Jane believed him. Her instinct had told her all along that there was something odd about Aaron.
Later that day, Macca accosted Mary Jane before she could disappear through the archway into the court.
"What the fuck are you playing at?"
Macca stared Mary Jane down. He'd already heard from other mouths on the street, and he knew there'd be fallout.
"I needed the money. Now Barney's out of work,"
she said. Macca understood, but his tone stayed hard.
"They'll string you up if they find out it's you."
Mary Jane's stomach twisted. The ache gnawed worse than ever.
"Maybe I'm tired, Macca. Fucking's easy money, sure, but I'd still rather not if I had the choice."
"They're still taking on Matchbox girls at Bryant and May,"
Macca offered. Mary Jane barked a laugh, bitter and sharp.
"Yeah, better off dead, even with their so-called improved conditions."
Her voice dripped sarcasm.
"Improved? Not much better than being fucked to death in a French maison close."
Macca's expression softened, sensing the truth beneath her bitterness.
"Still, better to lay low till it blows over. I'll see what I can do."
He shrugged, weary.
"Dunno what yet, but something'll turn up. In the meantime, try another part of town."
Mary Jane gave him a look of incredulous amusement.
"Yeah? Were you suggesting the West End, maybe?"
She said sarcastically.
"Back to the highway,"
Macca said.
"How much you make from your little escapade?"
"Just over a guinea."
Macca nodded slowly.
"You fucking mug. Hardly worth the risk."
"Yeah, I know wonderful in it."
Her irony bit deep.
"You expecting more?"
She gave a snort.
"I've done worse for less, but I was led to believe I'd get enough to get out of this shithole."
"Enough for a train out of here?"
Mary Jane nodded.
"And then what?"
He asked quietly. She shrugged.
"Fuck knows."
Macca felt pity for her situation, he said.
"Still, I suggest you lay low till I can sort something."
Barney had sworn blind he'd protect Mary Jane from any rogue bastard sniffing around her. His fists, his word, his pride, all of it he'd laid down for her. Mary Jane was at a loss what to do. Barney lay on the bed with his back to the room, facing the wall. He wasn't asleep, just sulking, lips set tight after yet another argument. He'd spent all of yesterday tramping the streets, hunting for work and finding none. He had no stomach to do it again today. When Mary Jane had suggested she go out to scrape some rent money, or at least enough for a drink, he'd flared, shouting until his voice cracked. Now he lay silent, stubborn and useless, Mary Jane splashed her face in the bowl of cold water on the side table, holding her hair back as she bent over it. The shock of it usually helped her shake off the fog. Not this morning. The pounding in her head was the bitter price of last night's gin, the last of their money gone. She straightened and caught her reflection in the broken shard of mirror propped against the mantel. The sight of herself, hollow eyes, blotched skin, was too much. She tilted it down, unable to meet her own gaze. Her eyes went to Barney's shape on the bed, shoulders hunched, body rigid with sulk.
Are you going to find some work then?
She asked, voice clipped. Silence. She tried again, sharper.
Well, are you?
Still nothing. Her temper snapped.
Fuck you then.
She snatched up her shawl, stormed to the door, and slammed it hard enough to rattle the cracked panes. The sound echoed down the passage as she stomped away. Alone in the cold morning light, her disposition was rock bottom. Cynicism surged like bile in her chest, that familiar black fog that came whenever she hit the lows. And today she was down deep.
Dorset Street was alive with the clatter of the morning. Mary Jane slipped out of the archway at a pace, half hoping, half dreading Macca might be outside his shop. If he was, he'd ask about rent. He always did. Better to keep her head down and keep moving. The 10 Bells was her target. Best chance of cadging a drink. As she crossed Commercial Street, St. Botolph's chimed the hour. On the bench outside Itchy Park, 2 old women, banner carriers from the night before, slept upright, propped against each other, mouths slack, hair damp with drizzle. A feral looking down and out muttered something as she passed. It might have been a greeting, but her mind twisted it into insult. A coster called from his stall, the usual bawdy pitch, yet all she heard was a shout cutting at her. She kept her eyes low, jaw set. Her nerves buzzed. She felt eyes on her everywhere, like she was lit up against the drab crowd. Self-consciousness curdled into self-loathing. When her mood was like this, there was no dragging herself out of it. Inside the 10 Bells, she circled the bar. No familiar faces, no generous patrons, only a young man at the counter looking bright-eyed and flush with coin. She gave her opening smile, the one meant to intrigue, to invite. But Francis Coles stepped in, voice pitched low and venomous.
You can fuck off, you old cow. He's mine.
Mary Jane stopped dead, smile freezing.
Oh yeah?
She fired back.
Never could handle the competition, could you, bitch?
The two locked eyes, hatred flaring. Then the young man drained his glass and rose.
You coming, Franny? I've got to be at work soon.
Coles beamed her triumph, sliding off the stool to follow. At the door, she glanced back, smirk sharp as a blade. Victory plain as day. Mary Jane's chest tightened. A dozen excuses flitted through her mind. Why the young man had chosen Coles, why it didn't matter. But none eased the hollow ache inside. Back on Commercial Street, the coster hailed her again.
What's wrong with you, Mary Jane? Right miserable cow today.
It was meant in jest, but she heard only a dig, another criticism. She turned away, jaw hard, and cut back toward Dorset Street. At the archway, Macca stood outside his shop, deep in talk with Donny from Crossingham's. Mary Jane kept her eyes down, hoping to slip past unnoticed. But Macca stepped into her path. She braced, waiting for the usual rent talk. Instead, he looked at her, eyes narrowing.
What the fuck's wrong with you?
She shook her head, refusing to meet his gaze.
Lover boy still not found any work?
She shook her head again. Macca let out a grunt, then moved aside, giving her room.
I was serious. You're better off down the highway till this all blows over. I might have a bit of work for Barney till I get things sorted for you, which will earn him enough to keep your room.
The words caught her off guard. She nodded mutely and slipped past him into the court. Inside number 13, the room was empty. Barney had gone. Maybe he'd finally taken the hint and gone to look for work. Mary Jane dropped onto the edge of the bed, shoulders slumping. Despair pressed heavy in her chest, sharper than ever. She reached under the bed and grabbed the laudanum bottle. She shook it. Fuck it. It was empty. She cast it away. Rosie lay on the sagging bed in the crumbling room in the crumbling house they all called home. The walls peeled, the damp crept, and the whole place felt tired. Moorish crouched at the hearth, coaxing reluctant life into the fire with the poker. The door slammed open. Murph barged in, grinning like a lunatic, an expression so out of place that Rosie sat up, instantly uneasy. He carried a struggling sack under one arm, whatever was inside, kicking and squirming. Rosie raised an eyebrow.
What you got in there?
Murph fought with the writhing bag. That alone was cause for concern.
Our own little cash cow,
he said, eyes glinting with triumph.
A bloody cow?
Moorish said incredulously.
Figure of speech, my dear boy, figure of speech.
Murph dumped the sack on the table and untied the string. The moment the opening loosened, a muscular Staffordshire bull terrier exploded out, landing on the tabletop with a thud. Then it sprang straight onto the bed. Rosie let out a startled squeal as the dog pinned her down and began happily licking her face with wild enthusiasm. She tried to push it off, laughing despite herself, but it had the strength of a small cart horse. The dog wagged its tail like mad, delighted by her attempt to resist. Moorish stared, baffled.
What the fuck? It's a dog, Murph!
Murph slapped the table, thoroughly pleased with himself.
I always knew you weren't as stupid as people said, Moorish.
Moorish gave him a sneer. Still surprised, he set the poker aside and approached the dog, hand outstretched to join in the affection. The terrier froze. Its joy vanished in an instant, replaced by a low, dangerous snarl. The lips curled, teeth bared. A warning. Moorish stopped dead. The snarl deepened to a growl. He backed away with both hands raised. He took the hint. Rosie rolled her eyes, even as the dog returned to happily licking her.
Rat baiting, I take it.
Rat baiting?
Moorish echoed.
Where'd you get it?
Rosie asked, wiping dog slobber from her cheek.
Won't it be missed?
Murph shrugged without care.
Who cares? Does it matter?
Rosie petted the dog and stared into the fire.
What's the point?
Murph scoffed.
Make some money, you daft bitch, and it's the sort of event that's likely to bring that bastard out in the open.
At that, Rosie turned slowly to look at him. Since Bash's death, something in her had gone cold, hollow. Murph had noticed and never said a word, because the truth was, something in him had died too. The candlelight flickered low in the back room of the Weaver's Arms, casting jagged shadows across the cracked walls. The floor was sticky underfoot, the smell of spilt ale, sweat, and ancient pipe smoke hanging heavy in the air. Macca's chair creaked as he leaned back, the unofficial throne in that faded kingdom of bruisers, drifters, and half-cocked schemers. Everyone was properly oiled now. Caleb had slipped into his lazy grin, Harry was 2 pints past sensible and 3 past polite, and Barney sat slumped, not used to the company and missing Mary Jane. He still didn't know the full reason why Macca had sent her to the highway, only that she had upset someone, and they were after her. Barney knew Mary Jane well enough to know this could well be true, so he let it drop. He didn't want to get on the wrong side of Macca or upset Mary Jane, but when Macca laid down the business, even in their drink-sodden state, the room snapped into a loose, lopsided attention.
We got a venue. I've arranged for loads of rats. And
that got them. Barney blinked like he was waking from a dream. Caleb leaned in, and Harry perked up like a hound sniffing blood.
Slades are attending then,
Caleb said, mock casual. Harry's face split into a devilish grin.
Yeah, I bet I know which Slade you want there, you dirty little bugger.
Caleb tried not to laugh.
Which one's that then?
Barney looked between them, confused as ever.
Which what?
Harry held out his hands in a round gesture.
The buxom one. The one with the big smile.
Caleb chuckled, then said more quietly,
Yeah, I get the impression she don't get the chance to smile much with Tommy around.
Oh dear, Caleb.
Macca said, dripping sarcasm.
You're starting to sound like some smitten little freedom fighter, gonna start handing out leaflets next. Free the Slade girl, down with domestic tyranny.
Caleb raised his hands in surrender, laughing.
Fuck off. I just feel sorry for her, that's all.
Harry threw a half-eaten pig's trotter at him. It bounced off Caleb's shoulder and landed with a sad splat on the floor.
Sounds like you should be drinking down the International Workers' Men's Club,
Harry joked. Macca chuckled, taking a long pull from his tankard.
Dodgy old lot down there.
Barney, however, wasn't laughing.
You lot joke, but I heard it was that lot who lit the fires at the docks.
The mood shifted slightly. Macca gave a slow, knowing nod.
Wouldn't surprise me. I wouldn't put anything past that lot. Bloody fanatics.
Harry piped up again.
The end justifies the means, eh?
Macca took a moment, staring into his drink, then nodded.
Sometimes.
Why are we having the rat-baiting meet, Macca?
Caleb asked, genuinely intrigued.
It's the sort of thing that brings everybody out of the woodwork. Lets the dog see the rabbit, if you like.
Macca said.
Yeah.
Harry added.
Gets everybody who's anybody in the district in one place. We'll know exactly where we stand then.
Then he shook off the shadow of that thought and moved briskly on.
Anyway, the meet's this weekend. Everything's arranged. You lot keep yourselves sober on the night. Yeah, I see your faces. No gambling, no wandering off. Keep your eyes open. I want to know who shows, who don't. We need to start pulling the strings again. Things are slipping.
He let that hang for a moment. The boys nodded, all understanding the weight behind his words. Macca broke the tension with a smile and grabbed his beer.
Right, I don't know about you lot, but I'm getting pissed.
The others laughed, the room relaxing in a wave of clinking tankards and crude toasts. The plotting could wait till morning. Tonight, they drank, and Macca slapped the maudlin Barney on the back, reassuring him Mary Jane would be back soon.
Toby, Paddy and Dan were getting themselves ready. Little Alfie lay curled up on a wooden bench in the corner of the room. He still looked rough. Clammy, sunken eyes, laboured breathing. Ivan glanced at him with barely disguised disdain.
No seamstress tonight?
He asked, voice flat, dismissive. Toby shot him a look, then glanced at Alfie.
What do you think?
Ivan raised a single finger in the air, his signature warning. Not loud, but loud enough. He turned his attention elsewhere.
And you, Paddy? Ready?
The glance they shared said everything. This wasn't about rat-baiting. This was about power, about Toby. Paddy didn't answer at first. His hand slipped into his coat pocket and rested on the bone-handled cutthroat razor inside. He gave the slightest shrug. Ivan smiled. From the bench, little Alfie stirred and caught the look between the two men. Ivan saw him watching and stared him down. The boy shrank into himself, coughed harshly, and looked away. Ivan didn't.
Won't be long now,
he muttered with that same cruel smirk. Toby heard it.
You're all hot, aren't you?
Ivan returned the stare, cold as winter.
Such is life, Toby.
He turned to young Dan, who was nervously adjusting his coat, trying to hide it, but failing.
No smile, Danny boy. I'd have thought a bit of dipping would be right up your alley.
Dan shook his head, stiff.
I'm fine. Just keen to get started.
Ivan watched him a moment, eyes blank, calculating. The boy's front was thin. Ivan had seen enough to know when someone was all mouth. Tonight would test that.
You should all do well tonight,
he said, addressing the room.
Your benefactors will be pleased.
Toby didn't reply. He just tugged the laces of his boots tighter, jaw clenched. God, he hated Ivan. Hated how the so-called benefactors had disappeared since they'd taken the Black Swan takings. No names, no faces. Just promises passed through Ivan's rat grin.
You coming?
Paddy asked Ivan. Ivan shook his head.
Not at first, maybe later.
Toby stood.
You ready, Paddy? Dan?
Both nodded. Toby turned to Alfie.
See you later, yeah?
Alfie coughed into his sleeve and gave a weak.
Okay.
And with that, the three of them left. Ivan stood there a moment, listening to their boots echo away down the cobbled street, until the sound faded completely. He turned back to little Alfie, still slumped and wheezing on the bench.
Poor old seamstress,
he said, tone dry, like he was commenting on the weather. Alfie looked up, eyes glassy. Ivan moved fast. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pressed both of his huge hands over Alfie's mouth and nose. The boy gave a weak, panicked struggle. Too sick, too slow. It didn't last long. When it was done, Ivan straightened his coat and looked down at the lifeless figure on the bench.
some people
He muttered.
are just better off dead.
Then he turned and left the back room without a backward glance.
The bull terrier barked and kept barking. Every time it let out a yap, the people in the next room hammered on the wall, prompting the dog to bark even more. Murph flung his cards into a messy heap on the table. His patience snapped.
Shut that fucking mud up.
Rosie, already tense, snapped back.
I've tried. But you aren't exactly helping.
Murph shot her a sharp look, then turned his glare toward Moorish, who was laid out on the bed in his usual lazy sprawl, boots up, hands behind his head.
Moorish?
Yeah?
Came the relaxed reply.
Shut that fucking mud up.
Moorish didn't even glance over.
Your fucking dog.
Murph seethed.
You know something, Moorish? You're a proper pretty cunt sometimes. If it was down to you, we'd never have a fucking penny between us.
When are we going?
Asked Rosie, petting the dog. Just then, the church bells told the hour off in the distance. Murph looked up.
No.
Piotr looked animated, his eyes gleaming as he paced before the flickering lamplight. His voice rang with conviction.
We must expose the degradation, the poverty, and the way to do that, comrades, is through the ever-potent press. Have you noticed how these murders, once ignored in the plush dens of the West, are now front-page news? They can't look away anymore.
Cozy shifted in his chair, brow furrowed.
But how does a rat-baiting meet help us?
Piotr turned to face the 4 gathered men of the International Working Men's Club, Dimmy, Sam, Morris, and young Coase himself. He smiled, raised his fist, and brought it down hard on the table.
Because, my young friend, it's a perfect symbol. Another rotten example of a brutal, inhumane society, sick from the inside out. When a man lives a life of endless toil, scraping through long days for pennies, shoved into slimy lodging houses with no dignity or rest, he needs some kind of escape. And what does he turn to? The pleasures of the flesh.
That raised a knowing chuckle among the men.
Which, of course, we appreciate.
Piotr added, smirking.
But in the sanctity of love, not in some rat-infested alley or piss-soaked tenement bed. Then there's the drink.
More nods.
Which we also enjoy.
Piotr said, pausing for effect.
But not to the point of madness and ruin, not to beat your wife or sell your coat for gin, and then gambling, blood sports, mankind's ugliest appetites, satisfied on the backs of innocent animals, in the name of escape.
He paused, eyes sweeping the group.
So yes, Koza, if such a barbaric sport as rat-baiting can be dragged into the spotlight, if the press can be made to show the public what filth their system breeds, then that's one more crack in the rotten edifice of capitalism.
Cozy nodded slowly, still a little unsure, but Dimmy sat forward, animated.
But how do you know the press will cover it?
Piotr's smile widened.
Oh, Dimmy, ye of little faith, I have connections. If we bring the chaos, the ink will follow. The right people will see.
That seemed to settle it. The men exchanged glances, nodding, the tension in the air sharpening with purpose. Time to act.
Tommy and Gabe had been summoned. The carriage journey from Commercial Street to the Oval Cricket Ground, where Surrey were hosting the Australian tourists in the final match of their tour, had taken the best part of an hour. Heavy traffic made the ride slow, stuffy, and miserable, and by the time they arrived, both men were weary and irritable. They were shown into a side room of the main pavilion, where 2 gentlemen from the Alhambra were already present, watching the match through open windows. As Tommy and Gabe stepped in, they were made to wait, ignored while the gentlemen applauded and commented on the cricket with the enthusiasm of schoolboys.
Oh, I say, bad luck, Wally. Just 1 short of his half-century,
said the first, clapping politely.
Yes, fine knock,
agreed the second.
Red was unlucky, but that Aussie, Boyle, is a hell of a bowler.
The first nodded.
He's certainly got our number today.
Only once the unfortunate batsman had trudged back to the pavilion did the gentlemen finally turn their attention to their visitors.
Tommy, Gabe,
said the seated man, gesturing them closer.
Good to see you. How are things shaping up?
Tommy nodded.
All right so far. Bit of skullduggery from the local scum, but that's Whitechapel for you.
Yes, quite.
The man replied, settling back in his leather chair.
Well, I'll come straight to the point. Sorry for the short notice, but we've got trouble.
Trouble?
Gabe echoed.
Rabble-rousers,
said the seated man.
Revolutionaries,
added the one at the window. Tommy raised an eyebrow.
Revolutionaries?
I don't appreciate anarchists in my country, Tommy.
The seated man said flatly.
I want it dealt with.
In what way, sir?
Tommy asked.
Well,
he smiled thinly.
That's why you're on the payroll, old boy.
Tommy gave a curt nod.
It's come to our attention they're planning to stir up disorder, specifically to attract press attention and cause panic. I want it stopped before it starts.
Do you have any names?
Gabe asked. The seated man glanced at his companion, who took over.
We believe they're operating out of Burner Street, the International Working Men's Club. Familiar?
Tommy looked to Gabe. Gabe shook his head.
Doesn't ring a bell.
Are you aware of any upcoming events?
The man asked.
Events?
Gabe frowned.
Bare-knuckle boxing, dogfights, things that draw a crowd.
The man clarified. Tommy shrugged.
Not that we've heard.
No large gathering planned for the near future.
Nothing we've caught wind of.
Tommy replied. The seated man interjected, his voice colder now.
These bastards use any chaos to their advantage, even the murders. Every throat slit, every dead whore is fuel for their cause.
Gabe blinked.
You think they're behind the killings?
The standing man shrugged. The seated man continued.
I don't know if they are. Frankly, I don't think they care. All they want is mayhem, and the more mayhem there is, the more the press lap it up. They believe that if enough eyes turn east, the system will crack. We can't allow that.
Yes,
added the second man.
The East End is a tinderbox. They think they can light the match.
Tommy and Gabe exchanged a glance. Tommy cracked a grin.
Don't worry, Governor. Leave it to us.
The gentleman did not smile. After a pause, the seated man added,
Naturally, you'll be suitably rewarded.
Tommy's grin widened. Gabe's too.
The drinking den had no official name, but it did have a backyard and a large warehouse out back, perfect for rat baiting. Coase pushed open the heavy door of the beer house. The hinges groaned. The stench of sour ale and damp straw hit him, but was an improvement to the rank, guttered alleyways. 2 or 3 rough-looking men slouched around the bar, muttering inaudibly. They didn't move, didn't speak, just watched him with the blank, feral eyes of animals looking, sensing for an opportunity. He didn't linger. Instead, he slipped through the back and stepped into the yard. It was a tight, grim space lined with wooden kennels. Chains rattled as fighting dogs strained toward him, their jaws snapping just shy of his boots. The air was thick with the stink of blood, wet fur, and the simmering expectation of the coming duels between dog and rat. Beyond the yard, in an outhouse, Cozy found the real show. A crowd of 30, maybe 40 men packed the enclosure, surrounding a low wooden pit. They were roaring, jeering, faces lit with cruel delight. Inside the ring, dogs tore through rats one after another. It was sport, if you could call it that, cheap, brutal, and deadly. The rats came from a box, dropped one at a time into the enclosure. The dogs were brought out in turns, whipped into frenzy by their handlers and cheered on by the mob. Coase edged into the shadows, keeping to the margins. He recognized the type: burglars, cut-purses and fences, the hardened core of East End villainy, faces coarse and pockmarked, eyes dead or dancing with drink. Most looked between 20 and 40, lean from hunger or bloated with gin. When one of the rats turned, baring yellow teeth at its canine foe, the crowd shrieked with laughter. But it never lasted. The dog always won. Murph, Rosie and Moorish leant against the fence, roaring on their dog. The bull terrier killed 4 in quick succession. The first rat gave him trouble, darting and twisting, trying to flee, but the dog learned fast. By the 4th, it was all instinct. Harry, at the edge of the pit, shoved a rat back in when it tried to climb the wall. The laughter was louder this time, more savage. Coase watched, but didn't smile. This wasn't entertainment. This was a message. If someone brought you here at night, someone who knew what they were doing, you'd never get out. Not in one piece.
Macca stood up on the iron balcony, arms folded, eyes scanning the crowd below. The noise of the ring pulsed up through the smoke-stained rafters, But he wasn't watching the sport. He never watched the sport. Barney held the door downstairs, and Caleb was stationed at the opposite end of the ring, posted like a quiet threat. Evo had taken the night off from Crossingham's to run the book, and so far, it was smooth going. Too smooth. Macca had called in a favour, and members of the Tyler gang were situated at strategic parts of the yard as backup if anything turned sour. Macca kept his focus on the faces, not the dogs. He was sure this meet would pull them out, the crews, the rivals, the whisperers, the watchers. Something was shifting on the streets. He could feel it. Nights like this were pressure cookers, all the wrong people in one place, licking their wounds or sizing up someone else's. A top bare-knuckle bout would have guaranteed carnage, but it had been too short notice to set one up. This would have to do. He just hoped it would be enough. Down below, Caleb looked up toward the balcony. Their eyes met. A shared shrug passed between them. Nothing yet. Caleb didn't relax, though. He never did. Murph, meanwhile, was in high spirits, laughing too loud and shoving coins into Evo's ledger like it was nothing. Rosie stood by him, calm on the surface, but tight around the eyes. She always got twitchy when Murph was like this, greased with good cheer, riding high, eyes shining with something that never meant good. She tried not to show it. That was when she noticed him. A man was watching her from across the ring, not leering, not flushed with the animal thrill like most of the men here. No, this one looked calm, still, not dead-eyed or twisted with want, but composed. Clean-shaven, almost handsome in the half-light, a face that didn't quite belong in a place like this. Coase. He smiled, not wide, not bold, just enough to suggest he wasn't here by mistake. Rosie glanced quickly to Murph. He hadn't noticed. Then she let herself smile back. Just a little. Not enough to mean anything. But Coase's eyes lingered as if to say, I saw that. And I'll be seeing you again. Toby, Paddy and Dan stepped into the storage room behind the den, a low-ceiling sprawl of timber beams, oil lamps, and the sweat and stink of 50 bodies packed tight. The murmur of bets, dogs and drink swelled to a roar. The place was heaving. Toby clocked familiar faces straight away, crooked noses, scarred mouths, eyes deadened by drink or bright with menace. All of them out tonight, he thought grimly. The whole of Whitechapel seemed desperate lately, for distraction, for escape, for blood. The three exchanged brief glances. Then, without a word, they drifted into the crowd. Before parting, Paddy leaned in to Dan's ear.
Watch who you dip,
he muttered.
Pick the wrong pocket and we're all in the shite.
Dan rolled his eyes.
I weren't born yesterday.
Paddy didn't respond, just watched him go. The lad was quick, sure. He moved quick when he wanted to, but that didn't mean he wasn't reckless. Paddy knew too well the kind of confidence you get when you've been surviving since you were 5, especially when you'd escaped from a cellar where a rogue sweep kept you like a bloody pet. Still, the boy had skills. That was clear. Toby stood back, half in the shadows, letting the chaos unfold around him. He didn't dip anymore. Not lately. Not since the Black Swan job. Not since the nightmares. His nerves were frayed. He couldn't tell whether it was the gin, the fear, or just the guilt, but something had started to rot inside him. He'd been holding it together with grit and bravado, but the cracks were spreading. He watched Dan move between punters, sleight of hand, deft and smooth as silk. The boy was good. Too good. It brought back memories of little Alfie. Christ, that hurt. Alfie had been like a brother. Toby still clung to hope the kid might pull through, but the hope was thin, and that's when he saw them. 2 doors opened at opposite ends of the outhouse like boxers entering the ring. Ivan came from one end, shoulders squared, eyes scanning with that cold, entitled arrogance he always wore. From the other, Tommy Slade walked in, flanked by Mickey Kidney and Long Liz on his arm like a prize he'd won. Toby's stomach turned. A dull pulse throbbed in his head. He could feel the sweat bead at the back of his neck. The air seemed suddenly too thick to breathe. He gripped the edge of a crate to steady himself. He wasn't sure how long he could keep up this act, how long before the nerves cracked, the facade broke, and everyone saw him for what he feared he'd become. A coward. Macca spotted him from the balcony the moment he stepped in. Toby, half in shadow, trying not to be noticed, failing at it. Macca smiled to himself. He never could resist knocking a man down a peg, especially when he sensed weakness. He came down the rickety wooden steps at a slow, steady pace, his boots thudding like punctuation. Slipping through the crowd with a nod here, a grin there, he cut straight to where Toby stood. Toby was watching Dan weave through the crowd, nimble and slick. Macca followed his line of sight, recognized the lad, and couldn't help the grin that crept across his face. He leaned in close to Toby's ear, voice low and coarse.
Watching your little rent boy touting for business, are we?
Toby flinched at the sudden voice behind him. He turned fast, rattled, but quickly tried to compose himself.
I love to come and gamble on the ratting and the dogs,
he said, too quick to be smooth. Macca tilted his head, amused.
That right? Only I ain't seen you put a bet on yet.
Just got here. Sussing it out,
Toby said, eyes darting. Macca nodded, slow and deliberate. Okay, then. He turned as if to leave, then leaned in again, closer this time, voice sharp with edge.
I'd tell your little rent boy, if I were you, keep his hands to himself. Wrong punter clocks him dipping, they'll open him up and use his guts to lace their boots.
Macca held his gaze a moment longer, just enough for the threat to settle in Toby's gut. Then he smiled, clapped Toby once on the shoulder, like it was all in jest, and disappeared back into the crowd, climbing the steps back to his perch. Toby stayed where he was, his mouth dry, heart thumping in his chest, not from the noise of the ratting pit, but from the slow, creeping certainty that Macca wasn't joking. Not one bit.
Murph watched the next dog leap into the pit, jaws snapping, a blur of muscle and noise. The crowd roared as the first rat was shredded, then the second. The stink of blood and sawdust rose thick in the air. Murph grinned, hollering like the rest. Beside him, Rosie held their dog, its legs kicking, teeth bared, eager for another turn. Murph glanced at her.
Take it out front. Chain it up in the kennels.
She looked at him, her jaw set, not impressed at being sent off like a servant. But she didn't argue. Not here. Not in front of the mob. She shifted the heavy terrier in her arms and started to push through the crowd. Men jostled and pressed in on all sides, their eyes flicking to the dog, then to her. A few hands grazed too close, casual, opportunistic. She bit her lip and kept moving, swallowing the urge to spit in someone's face. Fucking men, she thought bitterly, tightening her grip on the dog as it wriggled and growled in her arms. She ducked past a knot of onlookers and forced her way toward the door. The smell of sweat, ale and piss sticking to her skin like a film.
Macca watched Murph and chuckled. The man was a complete head case, loud, feral, and half-mad with bloodlust as his dog tore through rats like paper. Macca still hadn't forgotten what Murph had done to Mary Jane. No one had. But there was always a time and a place to settle scores. Tonight wasn't it. Not yet. Still, if it all went sideways, if fists started flying and the pit turned riot, well, accidents happened in the chaos, didn't they? Macca smiled to himself, lit a match with his thumb, and muttered,
Who knows?
Back at the ring, Murph and Moorish stood shoulder to shoulder, the pit's glow flickering in their eyes. Murph roared again as another rat went down.
Come on, you furry fuckers. Put up a fight.
He was laughing when he looked up, and the laugh died in his throat. Across the pit on the far side of the crowd stood a man watching the match in silence. Still, cold, alone, in the chaos. Murph's eyes locked on him. Ivan, the bastard stood there like he owned the place, like nothing ever touched him. that smug glower, that stiff arrogance. Murph felt the heat rise behind his eyes. That was one score he was not going to leave unsettled. Not tonight.
The Vigilance Committee was 10 strong tonight as they patrolled the gutters of despair from Commercial Street down to Hanbury. They moved like shadows through the filth and fog, past the lodging houses with their dim gas lamps flickering in broken windows and painted signs offering beds for 2 shillings and 6pence a night. Outside these grim establishments loitered the hopeless, the feral and forgotten, those who couldn't afford a drink in the pubs or stake a bet on the rat-baiting. Men hunched into their collars, women clutching shawls tighter against the cold, all of them trying to disappear into the soot-stained brick and gloom. As the committee rounded a corner, Abraham stopped. From down a narrow passage, the roar of a crowd broke the night's uneasy silence. Faint, but growing louder. Then came the sharp, wet bark of dogs, a high-pitched screech, and more drunken cheers. Lusky grinned as he listened.
Either bare-knuckle boxing or an illegal dogfight.
A vicious snarl rang out, followed by another round of howling and shrieking.
Dogfighting,
he said smugly. Abraham corrected him without looking.
Rat baiting. Macca mentioned he was holding a meet tonight.
Lusky shrugged.
Should we have a look?
Abraham raised an eyebrow, unmoved.
Didn't have you down as a gambling man, Lusky.
On occasion,
Lusky replied with a smirk. Abraham glanced back at the rest of the committee.
You lot carry on. Check down Whitechapel Road and Brushfield Street. We'll join you later.
With that, the 2 men turned and slipped through the side alley towards the noise. The din swelled with each step. Booze-fueled howls, the thud of boots on timber, the barking of hounds, and the occasional scream of a dying rat. Lusky licked his lips, his eyes dancing with anticipation. Abraham just sighed. London's belly was always full of rot, but tonight it stank worse than usual.
Tommy stood at the edge of the mob, watching the bloodthirsty crowd howl with every squeal and snap from the pit. He kept himself apart, leaning against a support beam with arms folded. Mickey Kidney, by contrast, was in his element, sweating with excitement, roaring at the dogs, and throwing coins down on bets like a man who believed luck owed him something. Long Liz hovered at his side, egging him on with teasing encouragement, as if he needed any. Tommy observed the pair with a mixture of amusement and disdain. Mickey always lost control when the blood was up. His woman was less taken by the pit and more taken with the crowd, her eyes roaming. And it wasn't long before Cozy noticed her. Rosie had gone, sent to the kennels, and Liz, though older and harder around the edges, still carried a raw magnetism. Coz caught her eye. Once. Then again. The 3rd time she smiled. That was all he needed. For Coz, the sport was tiresome. The real thrill was in the chase, particularly of women who weren't his to chase. It was a kind of personal warfare. Taking another man's woman was his version of drawing blood. Liz tried to pretend she wasn't watching, but she was. She'd long stopped believing in love. Now she believed in escape, and infidelity, especially with bastards like Mickey, was a kind of rebellion. She remembered the cafe she ran with her ex-husband, John Stride, and the string of betrayals that followed. Now it was just instinct. If excitement came in the form of danger, she took it. Anything to feel something. When Mickey wasn't looking, she slipped from his side and made her way to the back of the building where Coz was waiting. There, the 2 of them fell quickly into whispers and laughter. Heads bowed, bodies leaned close, drunk on mischief. Liz's cheeks flushed, and Coz licked his lips as if tasting victory already. At the pit, the current bout ended in blood and cheers. Mickey looked around for Liz, expecting her praise, or at least her sneer at his latest losing wager. But she was gone. He shoved his way past a knot of men and found Tommy standing coolly at the edge of the crowd, still unmoved.
You seen Liz?
Tommy didn't flinch. He barely looked at Mickey as he answered.
While you were losing your money,
he said dryly,
she was getting pulled, and I'd wager she's being fucked right now.
Mickey froze. Then Tommy let out a laugh and slapped him hard on the back.
I'm pulling your leg, mate. You looked like you were about to pop.
Mickey gave a nervous chuckle, half believing it, relief flooding his face.
Christ, you had me going.
But Tommy didn't smile this time. His eyes shifted past Mickey. Liz and Coase had just re-entered the room, breathless and glowing. Tommy gave a knowing nod.
I never said I was joking.
Mickey followed his gaze. His jaw tightened. The colour drained from his face, and then came roaring back in a flood of rage. Up on the balcony, Macca saw it all. Coase's swagger, Liz's glow, Mickey's dawning fury, and sipped from his flask. He'd seen it 100 times before. Nothing ever changes down here, he thought, and turned back to watch the pit.
The sight of a baying crowd, feral men riled by alcohol, bloodletting and wagers, brought Piotr's words back to Sam. The degradation and depravity of the lowliest element of the East End. He stood with Morris, both men watching the chaos unfold with measured detachment. They exchanged glances, silent understandings passing between them. They were watching for more than just sport. They were watching for opportunity. Cozy, younger and handsome, was already using his dubious abilities to provoke the relevant reaction, maybe even violence. But Sam and Morris, older and more calculating, waited for their moment. If Piotr was to be believed, the reporters weren't far off. The real game was about to begin.
Macca, still watching from the balcony, drew his watch from his pocket and checked the time. Just about time for O'Brien to make his entrance, he mused. But the way things were unfolding in the outhouse, he might not be needed after all. He'd already clocked the nefarious presence of both Tommy and the infamous Ivan. So far, the meeting had gone just as planned. Perhaps even better. Caleb spotted Harry across the pit, half shrouded in pipe smoke and shadows. Their eyes met. Harry rolled his eyes and gave a knowing grin. Caleb pushed through the crowd, dodging sloshing ale and cackling punters until he was beside him.
What do you reckon?
Caleb asked, glancing at the heaving throng around the ring. Harry leaned in and muttered something lost in the roar of men and dogs.
What did you say?
Caleb shouted over the din. This time Harry leaned closer and barked in his ear.
They're all in tonight. Got a feeling it's all gonna get messy. We'll find out what's what and who's who.
Caleb frowned.
How can you tell?
Harry's grin widened, almost feral.
You can't feel it? My time in India honed my instincts for impending violence.
Caleb looked at him. Harry's grin was infectious, even unsettling. Against his better judgment, Caleb felt one creep across his own face.
And if it does go down?
Caleb asked. Harry kept smiling, but there was steel behind it.
That's when old scores get settled. Chaos makes the perfect cover for vendettas. Always has. Always will.
Caleb nodded slowly, eyes scanning the room, and landed on Ivan across the pit. The brute's presence felt like a lead weight on the chest. Ivan met his gaze, unsmiling, cold. A curt nod was exchanged. Acknowledgement. Nothing more. No love lost there, not even a scrap, and both of them knew it.
Toby wove through the heaving crowd, shoulders brushing against the scum of Whitechapel. Thieves, fences, bruisers, and bruised, all varieties of lowlife packed in tight, eyes glittering with drink and bloodlust. These weren't the sort you dipped, not if you wanted to keep your fingers. Most of them knew who Toby was, maybe not by name, but by reputation, blind beggar crew. That carried weight, enough to make them wary, or leave him alone. Dan, on the other hand, was a shadow, a nobody, a kid, and that made him perfect for the job, earn his stripes, prove his worth. But this wasn't a race meet. There were no well-fed toffs fumbling for pocket watches or careless with coins. This was the rat pit, brutal, raw, and riddled with men who didn't just fight dogs, they bit back. Still, Dan had managed to lift 2 wallets already, clean, quick. But the third, not so lucky. The mark was sharp enough, or sober enough, to feel the hand in his coat. He turned with a snarl and caught Dan by the throat, shoving him hard against a wooden beam. The crowd barely flinched, too caught up in the roaring of the pit. Toby saw it happen. A part of him wanted to move, wanted to react, but his feet stayed rooted. The fear had him again, that gnawing, hollow dread that had been growing louder inside him day by day. He froze, and Ivan saw everything. Like a predator scenting weakness, Ivan moved, quick, silent, coiled with menace. He shoved through the mass of gamblers and gawkers with terrifying ease, parting the crowd. He reached the scuffle and without hesitation clamped a hand around the neck of the man who held Dan.
"Let him go,"
Ivan said, low and calm, but with weight behind every word. The man twisted to face him, spitting rage.
"He's a fucking little thief!"
Ivan leaned in, towering over him, eyes cold and unblinking.
"And now he's my fucking little thief."
The man faltered. Ivan didn't break his stare, didn't blink, didn't even look at Dan, just motioned with a flick of his head. Dan got the message. He fished the lifted wallet from his coat and handed it back. Ivan leaned closer, his breath hot in the man's ear.
"Now you fuck off, yes?"
The man didn't argue. He just backed away and vanished into the press of bodies. Ivan let him go and finally turned to Dan, who was still pale, still wide-eyed. Ivan didn't smile, just stared. Behind him, Toby still hadn't moved. Ivan clocked that too, and he grinned. Toby was done, and now everyone would know it.
The pit bull hit the dirt, and one by one, the rats were tossed into the ring, squealing, scrambling, eyes gleaming in the gaslight. Most didn't stand a chance. Then came one, a brute of a rat, nearly cat-sized, fur matted, and teeth bared. It flared up, refusing to bolt. The crowd howled with laughter and shock as the rat lunged, sinking its teeth into the dog's jowl before being violently shaken loose and slammed against the boards. It twitched once, then stilled.
"Fucking have it."
Murph screamed, eyes alight, fists clenched with excitement. His bull terrier was still top of the leaderboard, most kills, fastest times, and he was like a man possessed. His voice rose above the others, each fresh kill stoking something dark and primal inside him. Moorish stood beside him, arms crossed and wearing a half-smile. He wasn't as engrossed himself, but was almost feeding off Murph, drunk on violence and ego, as if it was infectious.
"We're gonna win this,"
Moorish drawled. Murph ignored him, eyes fixed on the pit, sweat shining on his forehead. His whole body was alive with tension, like a man who'd gambled his soul on every snap of the dog's jaws. Neither of them spared a thought for Rosie. She was still out back, wedged in a stinking alleyway with the dog chained to a post, fending off pissheads and grabby hands, while the men inside howled and cheered over slaughter. Forgotten. Again. But for Murph, nothing existed beyond that pit. Not Moorish, not Rosie, not even himself. Just the kill.
Abraham and Lusky stood near the edge of the crowd, half-shadowed beneath a splintered timber beam. The noise was deafening. Cheers, snarls, the wet snap of jaws, a pungent mix of sweat, sawdust and blood hung in the air. They exchanged glances, both unimpressed.
"We've missed most of the action,"
Lusky muttered, eyeing the ring warily.
"No point running the gauntlet of that lot just to lose a few bob."
Abraham gave a dry chuckle, folding his arms.
"Some of the East End's finest,"
he said, voice heavy with sarcasm. They both looked over the crowd, a patchwork of bruisers, gamblers, pickpockets and lowlifes. Faces flushed from drink and excitement. Morality left at the door. Lusky scratched the back of his neck, uncomfortable.
"Hard to say who's worse, the rats or the dogs."
Abraham didn't answer. He was too busy scanning faces, watching more than the spectacle. Something in the air felt off, an aura of rage and violence.
The air inside the outhouse was heavy with sweat, sawdust, and the scent of something darker, violence barely restrained. It hung like fog, pressing in on everyone present, a raw, volatile pressure, almost audible in its build. Macca, Abraham, Tommy, and Ivan each felt it, men attuned to the rhythm of chaos. They stood apart, scanning the packed crowd with calculating eyes, waiting for the inevitable spark to catch. It came from Mickey. The rage had been simmering in him since Liz drifted off with Coase. Tommy had helped stoke it, casually dropping that cruel suggestion like a match on dry straw. Now, Mickey was moving, shoulders square, jaw clenched, shoving through the crowd like a man possessed.
There,
Abraham said, nudging Lusky and nodding toward the oncoming storm.
He's going.
Lusky followed the look, clocked Coase, one of the anarchists from the Burner Street mob, still deep in flirtation with Liz. Neither had noticed the fury barreling toward them. On the balcony above, Macca straightened, leaning out for a clearer view, eyes narrowing. This was it. He could feel it. Mickey reached them. He shoved Liz aside like she was nothing. She stumbled, surprised, knocking into a group of punters who shouted in protest. But Mickey wasn't looking at her. His eyes were locked on Coase, who rose like a dog bristling at a rival, chest out, hackles up, ready to bare teeth. The two men stood nose to nose, the crowd around them thinning as instinct pulled bodies back from the point of impact. Abraham turned to Lusky, voice low but firm.
Get the shunters. Now. This is going to blow.
Lusky didn't argue. He disappeared into the crowd as Mickey and Coase stood frozen in that last breath before eruption. Above them, Macca exhaled through his nose and muttered under his breath,
"Here we go."
Tommy leaned against a support beam, arms folded, eyes fixed not on the two men squaring off, but on the shadows beyond them. Mickey was inches from Coase now, fists clenched, jaw set like stone. Coase wasn't backing down. He was too arrogant, too hungry for disruption, but Tommy wasn't interested in the fight. No, he'd seen this act before. It was the audience that interested him. That's when he spotted them. Morris and Sam huddled near the rear wall like scavengers circling a wounded beast. There was no fear in their eyes, just excitement. Tommy's lip curled. These had to be the Burner Street lot. His benefactors had warned him, rabble-rousers eager to pour petrol on any blaze, the sort that didn't start fires, but made sure they burned bright and got noticed. Tommy glanced back at Coase. Young, flashy, smiling like he'd won something already. A man like that didn't move in on a woman like Long Liz by accident, not when she was tied to someone as unhinged and violent as Mickey. Unless he wanted the chaos. Unless the chaos was the point. He shifted his attention again. Morris was moving, at Sam's insistence, out the back door. Not to fetch help, Tommy suspected, but maybe to fetch a reporter. Or worse, Tommy followed his line of sight upward. Macca was watching too, not the brawl, him. Their eyes locked. Tommy didn't blink, so that was the game. This whole event, bait, a ruse, a lure to flush out the worst of the lot. A roar from the pit tore through the room. Murph, roaring with glee, pumped his fists in the air. The last dog had chewed its way through a bag full of rats, but not as quickly or as ferociously as Murph's dog. Moorish had grabbed him in a headlock, both men bouncing drunk on blood and victory. Ivan, leaning in the shadows, watched them. His gaze narrowed as he clocked Murph. Recognition flickered. That was him, the bastard who'd tried to rob him down Burner Street. Small world. And it was getting smaller by the second. Tommy didn't move. Let the rats come out. Let the fire catch. He'd been sent to snuff it out, but he wanted to see exactly who'd run to the flames first.